Today, we begin discussing a book published in May 2023 titled Life After Capitalism, The Meaning of Wealth, The Future of the Economy, and the Time Theory of Money. The author of this book is the renowned economic thinker, George Gilder. Born in 1939, Gilder has had a significant impact in China, especially with his influential book, Wealth and Poverty, a new edition for the 21st century. In recent years, he has led the digital economy's ideological trends, making him an indispensable figure of our time. Gilder advocates for the role of entrepreneurs and innovation in the economy, emphasizing a free market approach. At 83 years old, he continues to produce new ideas, utilizing fresh materials with remarkable vigor. Life After Capitalism is not only a culmination of Gilder's thoughts but also the most ambitious and revolutionary work to date, because he aims to rewrite the entire field of economics. As Chinese readers, we might not be enthusiastic about such ambitions, given the abundance of scholars in our country seemingly attempting to rewrite economics constantly. However, this is George Gilder. Moreover, he isn't working in isolation. He incorporates the latest and robust intellectual resources, backed by solid academic support. This book is the result of a series of ideological currents. For instance, 3 books that you might be familiar with. The Rational Optimist, How Prosperity Evolves by Matt Ridley, Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think by Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler. These books refute various pessimistic views on human development, asserting that the economy not only has been consistently progressing but will continue to do so, benefiting everyone. Additionally, Cesar Hidalgo's Why Information Grows, The Evolution of Order, From Atoms to Economies, proposes that the true value of modern commodities, such as luxury cars like Bugatti Veyron, lies not in their material composition but in the information they contain. Following along these lines, you arrive at Gilder's new book. The backdrop to this series of ideas is that capitalism is at a crossroads, facing 2 trends. One trend argues that capitalism has major issues, and free markets are ultimately unviable, calling for government intervention in the economy. The other trend, leveraging the momentum of the information industry, maintains an optimistic outlook. One path leads to closure and control, while the other leads to openness and freedom. Firstly, let's address the first trend. Capitalism has faced criticism since its inception, primarily divided into 2 camps. One could be labeled the angry faction, which believes that capitalism has widened the wealth gap. They argue that capitalists amass wealth by exploiting workers, making capitalists the enemies of the working class and, consequently, the enemies of society. This faction is more prevalent in developing countries. In developed nations, where worker incomes are higher and welfare is comprehensive, there is less hostility towards the wealthy. In developed countries, the prevailing narrative is the pessimistic faction. They acknowledge that capitalism has brought prosperity but claim it comes at a cost. The argument is not about capitalists exploiting workers. Instead, it focuses on humanity collectively exploiting the earth. With limited resources and a growing population, everyone desires a better life, making this economic growth unsustainable. The notion is that, if everyone in China lived as Americans do, we would need more than one Earth. In recent years, the pessimistic narrative has shifted from concerns about oil depletion and population crises to global warming. In essence, capitalism is portrayed as dooming the Earth. Both factions advocate for collective prosperity and sustainable development. Their common solution is that governments should take control of the economy, regulating financial markets, commodity markets, labor, investment, and trade more rigorously. Governments, naturally inclined to expand their power, favor this trend, leading to an increasingly closed and unfree world. Furthermore, some voices now call for not only economic regulation by the government but also the regulation of people. Especially with the pretext provided by the COVID-19 pandemic, governments worldwide have intensified restrictions on people's freedoms. Gilder refers to this as emergency socialism. If this trend prevails, it could lead to the end of globalization, with nations returning to isolationism. Fortunately, the information technology revolution has brought another trend. The growth facilitated by Moore's law is unprecedented in history. The capabilities of electronic products, such as computing power, storage capacity, and digital information, are becoming increasingly affordable. While this is a positive force, some criticize it, claiming that developed countries, like the United States, are moving towards a virtual economy, a decadence of the real economy. They believe that only the physical economy can create true wealth. On the other hand, companies like Apple, Amazon, and Google, based on information technology, are now the most valuable, in terms of market capitalization. Their value continues to grow, seemingly without signs of slowing down. Traditional economics struggles to comprehend this phenomenon. Gilder's viewpoint is clear. The trend towards closure is a result of cognitive errors, and the trend towards freedom, through informationization, is the correct one. To explain the second trend, we must re-examine some basic assumptions of traditional economics, such as, people work for incentives, only material wealth is real wealth, resources are inherently scarce, and, the foundation of economics is a static demand model. Gilder advocates for a new idea called the information theory of economics. This doctrine comprises 4 key propositions. 1. Wealth is knowledge. 2. Growth is learning. 3. Information is surprise. 4. Money is time. Let's delve into the first part of this new theory. Money is time. Pay attention to the sequence. There used to be a saying, time is money, emphasizing the preciousness of time, suggesting that time can be considered a kind of money. Now, Gilder proposes that money is time, representing a scientific measurement method for money. It means that the money you spend is essentially your time. This concept is foundational to the information theory of economics, and it needs to be explained clearly. Let's start with a basic question. How much is your income worth? In 2020, the median monthly wage for an individual in Beijing, China, was 6,906 yuan. Now, how does this income compare to the United States? Consider that the minimum wage in California is $14 per hour. Directly converted at the exchange rate, this is roughly twice the median wage in Beijing. However, such a comparison is unreasonable because of the different living costs in the two locations. Moreover, how does this income in Beijing compare to China 2 decades ago? Direct comparison is also inaccurate, considering inflation. The reality is that even after factoring in exchange rates and inflation, it's challenging to calculate. What we truly want to know is not the specific region's price levels at a specific time but how the average person is faring. In 1994, Yale University professor William Nordhaus, who later won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2018, introduced an algorithm. He argued that what we should genuinely measure is time. The real price of a product or service is the time you need to work to buy it. For instance, consider home lighting. A 100-watt incandescent bulb, illuminating for 3 hours a day, produces 1.5 million lumen-hours of light in a year. In 1800, because people could only use candles for lighting, producing this amount of light required 17,000 candles. Buying these candles would necessitate an ordinary worker to work 1,000 hours. Today, producing the same amount of light, an ordinary worker needs to work only 10 minutes. From working 1,000 hours to working 10 minutes, this represents true progress in our spending on lighting. After all, everything can change, except time. Everyone only has 24 hours a day. Nordhaus' algorithm is called the time theory of money, essentially creating a tool to measure prices and income objectively. Although simple, this tool brought about a paradigm shift in economics, enabling a more objective calculation of wage income and living costs. Following this, 2 economists, Gail Pooley and Marian Tupy, expanded Nordhaus' method. They calculated the time price of a commodity by dividing its nominal price by the nominal hourly wage of a worker. Comparing the time prices of commodities across different periods and societies allows for a comparison of the changes in the world's abundance. For example, the American Farm Bureau Federation annually calculates how much it costs for a typical Thanksgiving dinner. If you only consider the dollar price, accounting for inflation, this cost has hardly changed from 1986 to today. However, when considering changes in workers' income and calculating the time price, an American worker needed to work 32.9 minutes in 1986 to afford a Thanksgiving dinner, whereas in 2021, they only needed to work 9.2 minutes. A 70% decrease in price. Isn't this tangible economic growth? Using this algorithm, we can quickly draw two important conclusions. The first conclusion is that the abundance level worldwide has been consistently increasing, and the ones benefiting the most are the poor. In 1960, an average Indian had to work 7 hours to earn enough for a day's worth of rice. Today, it takes less than 1 hour. In comparison, considering that Americans primarily consume wheat, let's look at wheat. An Indiana worker needed to work 1 hour in 1960 to earn enough for a day's worth of wheat, but today, it only takes 7.5 minutes. Clearly, when compared to Americans, Indians have benefited more from these years of progress. Indians have reduced the time spent working for food by 6 hours, which they can now use to earn other consumables. Calculating with time prices, the world grows by 4% each year, with the most significant beneficiaries being the poor. This refutes the arguments of the angry faction. In reality, the poor should be the ones most supportive of economic growth. The second conclusion is that economic growth is, in fact, sustainable. The pessimistic faction continually argues about overpopulation, dwindling resources, environmental degradation, and the unsustainability of current growth. According to this logic, the current world economy should be in a phase of diminishing marginal utility, and growth should have slowed down, right? The truth is that from 1980 to 2020, the world population increased by 75%, but the time prices of the 50 most crucial commodities for sustaining life decreased by 75%. A typical worker's ability to buy goods and services with their work time increased by 300%. Products like tea, coffee, shrimp, and salmon, sourced from nature, experienced an 80% decrease in time prices. While the population increased, everyone's standard of living improved. Where are the signs of resource depletion? Clearly, resources have become more affordable, and everyone has more resources. This contradicts the narratives of the pessimistic faction. In reality, the angry faction and the pessimistic faction share a common logic. That resources are scarce. Capitalists take away resources from workers, and once our generation depletes them, there will be none left for future generations. However, the developments of the past few decades have shown that the only truly scarce resource in the world is people's time. It's time to rethink economics. We will discuss the next part in the following section.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.